Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Friday legislative update. I'm Kevin Toon, filling in for Patty Mulvihill, who's at the Northwest Regional Managers Conference most of this week. We are now about to complete week 9 of the legislative session. This week also marks a critical juncture for the session as we're up against the deadline, which will substantially reduce the number of bills that will continue in the process moving forward. We'll get into that as we go along today. Lots to cover. Before we start, some quick housekeeping issues. If you have not done so, please make sure your microphone is muted. Second, we will end this webinar promptly at 1 o'clock. Also, if you have not done so yet, please update your screen name to include your city. I will be putting instructions on how to do that in the chat momentarily. As I said, lots of information to cover. We'll do our best to move through it quickly so we can get to your questions after we hear from our lobbyists. Here's the agenda. Top bills of the week. We're going to talk about local transient lodging tax flexibility, the Ways and Means statewide roadshow that's kicking off this week, the bill that will extend unemployment benefits for striking workers, and infrastructure funding for housing development. We'll follow that with updates on several ongoing bills. This includes several measures related to energy policy, the operator and training bill, reciprocity for water and wastewater operators, and then a technical fix bill. We have several cities that are looking to proceed with funding related to housing infrastructure. There's a technical fix needed to some 2024 legislation. We're going to talk to you about how that fix is going and how we can move that process forward. Finally, we'll look at some emerging issues, including wildfire funding, wildfire mapping, and the Oregon Transportation Package. Because of the volume of information we're going to provide today, we ask you to hold your questions until the very end. If you do have a question as we're going along, please raise your Zoom hand or type your question in the chat. Myself, other staff will do our best to make sure we know who raised their hands and posed their questions first. So let's dive into things, and we'll turn it over to LLC Legislative Director Jim McCauley. Jim.
Good afternoon, everybody. So March 21st, I think this is the day after the start of spring. So as Kevin mentioned on the front end of this, fairly important day for us. This is a first chamber deadline. So effectively what that means is any policy bill that has not been scheduled for a work session by the end of today, essentially 5 o'clock, the bill is effectively dead. Now, there's plenty of ways to try to bring that back. However, it's a major point in the session where we start to see things drop off, the number of bills that we end up having to manage and cover over the course of a session. So we have an endless supply, honestly, of legislation that has come forward. I thought we were pretty much stopped when we hit 3,350 bills last week. We now are 10 shy of 3,400 bills that have been introduced this session in Oregon. It was in DC last week. I think I kind of mentioned, gave you a little bit of a rundown on how that went at the National League of Cities meeting. And by comparison, there is no other state in the country that we can figure out based on our colleagues that were in DC that has anywhere near the volume of legislation that's been introduced during any given session. California is typically about half of this number, and California is a full-time legislature. When you look at our neighbors to the north or to the east or other Western states, typically they're not going to be coming above 400 or 500 bills during an entire session, and we've got to deal with obviously almost a tenfold increase over that from some of our states. So in any case, that number is going to drop. That'll be a great thing for us. And I think as we go forward here, what we really try to focus on again is top line bills where we really need help. We need the grassroots. It's incredibly important for us. So with that, I'm going to bring Scott Winkles on first to just give you an update on Senate Bill 916. This is the bill that we've been working on for the last several weeks, which will attempt, the bill itself essentially tries to extend unemployment benefits to striking workers. So Scott, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Or I guess it's afternoon now. So I wish I had better news to report on this bill, and I'll start by thanking everybody who reached out and who engaged with our legislators on this. We had it on, it was up on the Senate floor this week. Got 16 votes, which is the bare minimum to pass. We had two Republican senators who were off the floor, excuse business of the House or the chamber, and then we had two Democrats who voted with us. Both Senators Solman out of Hillsborough and Senator Golden from Southern Oregon were both opposed, but unfortunately that was not enough to keep this bill from moving forward. Where we go from here, I will say that the floor debate was disappointing in some ways. I think there is a profound misunderstanding of how collective bargaining works for public sector employers and employees. There was some belief that somehow we wouldn't have to hire replacement workers if our workers went on strike. I think this bill makes it more likely that we will see strikes within city and other local governments going forward, simply because providing unemployment insurance to individuals who walk out on by their own choosing mitigates the risk they would experience in if they chose to go out. So that was unfortunate. If your senator did vote no on the bill, I'd encourage you to reach out and say thank you. Particularly to Golden and Solman. They both got a tremendous amount of pressure from within their caucus on this bill. So that's where we're at. The bill now goes to the House. We're not done yet. I think the lobby team and our allied associations want to pull something together on Monday, make sure every member of the House gets a contact before this bill gets heard in the House committee. I expect it to be going to House Labor Standards, chaired by Representative Graber, vice chaired by Representative Elmer, before too long. I don't expect it will not be heard until second, third week of April at the earliest, due to they're going to finish out their House bills before they take up the Senate bills. So we do have a little bit of time, and I'd like to use that time by encouraging the members to reach out and talk to their House delegations and explain to them how this bill is damaging. I think Monday we'll be sending out an additional alert with some more talking points, probably shift our strategy a little bit on the House side, away from the fiscal impacts and towards the impact on public services. One of the things, and I know I'm going a little long, but I'll close up here in a second, but one of the things that Senator Solman said in her floor speech and pointed out was that cities and other local governments were experiencing the same turmoil from the federal government as the state is receiving. And now is not the time to be now is the time for us to be focusing on how we provide services to Oregonians. And I think that's probably going to be that'll be our theme moving forward as we talk about this bill in the House. So with that, I'll close and I'll be around for questions.
Scott, thanks very much for that. So this always comes down to a math question. And as you mentioned, they got the bare minimum with 16 members. So our efforts, the coalition that was fighting this bill, were able to peel off 2 senators. So on the House side, when we look at the numbers, I guess the magic number to focus in on is to try to get 6 House members to basically oppose this from the Democratic caucus. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that would be our goal. I think 916 is a weird bill, and it really kind of changed our dynamic and how we think about stuff, because as you'll see in the chat from Diana Moffett, the bill is pretty brutal. And I think last session, 2 sessions ago, we probably would have looked at this bill and said, there's no way they're going to do this. There's no, I don't think we can assume that any bill is now a bridge too far if this bill goes forward. So I think there are a lot of lobby organizations, a lot of really, really good colleagues of ours in the public and the private sectors who were sort of surprised by what happened yesterday on this bill. And I think they're now energized and engaged. So, but that's our math, and I think people are now, I think the wake-up call was received, and we're going to work this.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And again, the one thing we always talk about, how incredibly important that grassroots advocacy is, and really appreciate folks becoming very involved in this process.
Yeah, and it was the grassroots advocacy that got us Senator Golden on board. So, yeah.
Definitely. Okay, thank you again. And let's shift up to the top of the agenda. We're going to hit on TLT, transient lodging tax flexibility. It's got a little bit brighter story for us. And I'll let Jenna take over from there.
Did you just say bright and TLT in the same sentence? No, so the TLT bill for flexibility of spending the 70% on tourism impacted services had a hearing yesterday in the Emergency Management, General Government and Veterans Committee. It was a very lively hearing. Not everyone got to testify. There were a handful of cities who showed up in person to testify, and we really appreciate you. There's a lot of people who have put things on the record. There's still time to put letters of support on the record. So I will put in the chat a link to the bulletin article that has sample testimony. If you would still like to put something in, you can do it till 1 p.m. tomorrow. We'll need every drop of support we can get right now. The goal is to get the committee to move the bill to the House Revenue Committee with no recommendation. There's a work session scheduled for Tuesday, the 25th. But right now there is one committee member out because of medical reasons. And so we really need your help reaching out to Representative Lewis, Representative Boyce, and Representative Scarlatos. If you have a relationship with them, tell them what it would mean to you. We need people from very big tourist areas across the state, but also other cities who have TLTs who may be close to a big city that brings tourists through them, someone who's got lots of hiking trails. Maybe your community exploded because of social media, and during the pandemic, people discovered your community and you had a TLT already. All of this would be really, 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 really helpful. And we appreciate all that you've done so far. So the ask is vote yes to get the bill to the House Revenue Committee, to your legislators, and reach out to me if you need anything.
Great, appreciate that. And you've also got
the next one.
Actually, before we leave that, I know you've already mentioned who to target, the importance of having these committee members being able to advance this to the Revenue Committee next, so we can get into the details, the conversation that's going to help move this thing through process. Does that need to take place today? Does it, I mean, can you talk about the urgency of making sure they get that outreach, I guess?
Yeah, so we need you to talk to your legislators before Tuesday, because that's when the vote is going to happen during that work session at 1 p.m. I also think that, like I said, it was a full hearing room on both sides. So this has always been a tense topic at the legislature, and it's always been a fight. And so we're grateful that we got a hearing, but I don't think we can let up on the momentum. So if you have those relationships, continue to talk to people, continue to get things on the record. And yeah, we'll be doing, if we get to the Revenue Committee, we'll be doing this whole quote unquote dog and pony show over again, because I think it will continue to need to happen to get this bill to progress.
I mean, my sense too is I think there's still an education gap for some of those committee members that would really benefit from that outreach, and being able to reinforce the messages and the narrative that Jenna has helped create with our coalition members. But yeah, this is one of those bills that we've got an opportunity here. And in order to keep it moving forward, we need to build on that momentum. because we know the opposition will. So if you see these folks in the grocery store, literally, or at the coffee shop, or at a town hall meeting over the weekend, you need to have a conversation with them. I mean, that's really the urgency on this piece. So let's shift a little bit to Ways and Means Roadshow, since that's kicking off this weekend.
Yeah, so another bulletin article, it's linked in the chat for everyone. Ways and Means is the budget committee of the legislature, and they have now, the co-chairs of Ways and Means have released their budget framework, which is linked in the bulletin article. You can look at the priorities for the state and how much money they're looking to spend on their biennial budget. It'll be $39.1 billion if I have the number right off the top of my head. We as LOC staff have kind of outlined some of our top priorities. You know, you heard a lot about our top 8 priorities at the beginning of session. Some of those have some budget asks tied to them. And then we've also done more subject matter budget asks. So if you care about things like energy policy or economic development, housing, land use, there are some different budget asks in there that if they align with your city's priorities and you want to see those happen, we would love for you to bring those up in the Ways and Means Roadshow. This Saturday, it will start off in Gresham. The other ones will be scheduled mostly on Fridays. They'll hit Astoria, Warm Springs, LeGrand. They'll have a statewide one in Salem, which will just mostly be virtual. It's for all the people who can't attend statewide. And then also in Klamath Falls. So they'll be doing that over the next month. And we will start gearing up towards the second half of session, which is really budget season. And they do their roadshow, and then the next thing will be the revenue forecast in May and seeing if the numbers are still holding on what they have to spend. And either they can add a little bit more to their budget or they might have to take some things away. So we appreciate if you attend those. They're usually really well attended. There are registration links in the bulletin article where you can register to testify. Do that in advance because these ones also end up being really packed. They also tend to give people 2-minute time limits. So if you and your colleagues can split it amongst yourselves to carry multiple messages, that might be helpful.
No, thank you for that. And, you know, when we've had these road shows in the past, sometimes the committee has allowed local elected officials go first. That is not necessarily a guarantee this time around. And honestly, the last set of road shows that we had back in the 23 session, I'll say process did not continue throughout the entire roadshow. I think they had a couple of them where they allowed some of the local officials to speak first. That's in all likelihood not happening. So Jenna's right. Make sure you get those registrations in so you can at least get in the queue and be part of that conversation. And you're going to have an elevator speech here. So it's probably going to be less than 2 minutes or less. So focus on the stuff, focus on the high point, and make sure you get your written materials into the process as well. So we're going to take another little bit of shift. This is more kind of getting into the legislative updates. Those are clearly the most important elements going forward, really focusing in on the transient lodging tax in 3556. So hitting on the legislative update piece, we're going to let Nolan come on here, and he has not been on in a few weeks, and give an overall energy update, top line. And I think you've also got a bulletin article on this to get into some of the details.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And yeah, I just put into the chat along with my information, the link to the article that goes into more detail on the bills I'll talk about, as well as additional bills that I'm not going to focus on. For the interest of the time, I'll try to really focus on the high level. So first, really want to kind of focus on investments and supports for local government. The top priority for us, investments-wise on the energy side, is the ODO, the Oregon Department of Energy POP 204, which provides an additional $25 million towards the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. This program provides planning and construction grants for renewable energy projects, resiliency projects, or a combination of both, and with a return on that investment directly, so it actually doesn't cost local governments any funding. A lot of cities have actually applied for planning grants and construction grants. Many have received planning grants or are waiting for the construction grants. This just keeps that program growing, so you all have options to see yourselves in these benefits. The second bill to focus on, Senate Bill 92, is the Community Solar Program that was passed a few years ago. They are trying to expand that program from 3 megawatts to 20 megawatts. We did have issues with that, mainly because the current 3 megawatts provides a property tax exemption. And extending it to 20 megawatts would have allowed up to about 100 acres of land to be property tax exempt. So we negotiated that to keep the 3 megawatt threshold, but nothing above that would be property tax exempt. But these projects can be located anywhere in the state to benefit your communities. Next, I'll shift to energy resilience. There's a microgrid package of bills that is coalescing around 2 bills, House Bill 2066, which includes another energy microgrid bill, and 2065. These bills really are trying to open the door to communities for energy resilience and to allow microgrid developments. We are waiting on for some final amendments for both of these bills. And have been told that they're going to schedule a work session on April 1st in the House Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee. The next energy resilience bill I wanted to flag is House Bill 3170, which is asking for additional funding for the Resilience Hubs and Networks grant program. The first round of this program received over 700 applications during the last grant cycle, and only 96 projects out of that were actually funded. This is a unique program, and it's actually very flexible in how you can utilize those grants, so they can really be tailored to your community. Cities have access to them, nonprofits have access to them. You can go into coalitions and partnerships for those, but it's a widely utilized program already. We are just trying to ask for $10 million to keep this program going. It has been referred to the Ways and Means Committee, so we'll just wait for that process to get that funding for those programs. Next, I'll shift to increasing transparency and modernizing the PUC general rate cases. There are a number of bills that are in here. First up, Senate Bill 688, which asks for a PUC investigation to develop and adopt a framework for performance-based regulations. PBR tools, as they're also known, have the ability to increase energy resilience and to incentivize distributive energy resources, battery storage, and microgrids. The bill is waiting to get scheduled for a work session in the Senate Energy and Environment Committee. I believe we are also waiting for one additional amendment. We are also asking for $500,000 for the PUC so that they can hire a contractor to do this investigation for them, or a consultant, I should say. Next is House Bill 3179, also known as the Fair Energy Act. This asks the PUC to consider economic impacts of rate increases, but also prohibits rate increases during the coldest months of the year. Additionally, it would allow flexibility in scheduling those rate increases. So instead of having them go in all at one time, they would have the ability to spread those out over months or even years to reduce the immediate impact on customers. The bill is waiting to be scheduled for a work session as well in the House Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee. Senate Bill 88 is the Transparency in Rates Act. This just prevents certain uses of ratepayer funds towards political activities as well as other activities that are not directly related to infrastructure or critical investments or safety. That bill is also waiting for to have a work session scheduled in the Senate Energy Environment Committee, but we expect that to happen shortly. The last one that I have on the list for this section today is the Power Act. That's House Bill 3546. Creates a new classification for large power users like data centers, and really just ensures that increased costs that are associated with their increased demand, as well as potential transmission upgrades, will be borne by them instead of residential customers or other classifications that are not directly tied to that increased demand. This is a similar tool that our consumer-owned utilities already utilize with large power users. The next section is small modular reactors. It's a type of smaller nuclear facility, up to 300 megawatts, can go slightly more than that. It's a reliable energy resource. It is controversial because of the original ballot measure, as well as because it's nuclear and does provide some nuclear waste. We do have a lot of members that are very interested in allowing the siting of nuclear reactors. It can really help stabilize the grid in certain areas. So the first bill I want to focus on is House Bill 2410, which would allow for an SMR demonstration project in Umatilla County. The bill would be referred to Umatilla County residents to vote on whether or not they want that demonstration project to move forward. We are supporting that bill. It's currently waiting to be scheduled in the House Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee. And I will post the link to all the members of that committee shortly. And we really encourage members here today, if you are interested in small modular reactors, to reach out to your representatives and encourage them to support the allowance of this moving forward and to allow the people of Matilda County to vote for that. The next SMR legislation is Senate Bill 215 with the -1 amendments. This would allow for a statewide vote to allow specifically small modular reactors, not large nuclear reactors. This bill is waiting in the Senate Energy and Environment Committee. Again, I will put those committee members in the chat shortly. And again, would encourage any folks to reach out to their senators and encourage them to support this legislation moving forward. Both of those bills do require a vote of the people, and it's one of the reasons that we are supporting that bill. Lastly, in this area, House Bill 2038. This is really just a study for the Oregon Department of Energy to study nuclear energy as well as waste disposal. We have high confidence this bill will move forward. They're just amending it to provide for more neutral language. Last two bills I want to focus on are modernizing and updating the grid. House Bill 3336 requires electrical companies to conduct an analysis to determine the cost effectiveness and timetable of multiple strategies that use grid enhancing technologies to increase electric transmission capacity. They are waiting for amendments to this bill, amendments that we are slightly concerned about because they are attempting to impact our right-of-way authority when it comes to doing modifications to current right-of-ways. So we are keeping an eye on this. It's in the House Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee. We are just waiting for the work session to be posted on that one. And then the last bill, House Bill 3609, will require electric companies to develop, consider, and plan for the incorporation of distributive power plants, otherwise known as DPPs, into their resource mix. DPPs work by utilizing already built solar, battery storage, electric vehicles, and other infrastructure on homes and neighborhoods in times of a utility's need and compensating those customers for the use of their power. It's currently waiting to be scheduled for a work session as well in the Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee. I know that was a lot. My information is in the chat if anybody has any questions, and I will shortly post the information for who resides on those committees. And if you're interested in any of these bills, just reach out to your representative or senator and encourage them to support moving it forward.
So Nolan, that is quite a download. I know you haven't been on here in a few weeks, so you kind of caught everybody up on the plethora, I'll say, of different energy bills that we're working on. So is it best probably that, again, as you mentioned, folks should probably be reaching out to you directly for details, but they at least have a little bit of a summary of this in the bulletin as well. That's extensive. It's got the hyperlinks to everything. Is that probably the best next step for them?
Yes. Yes, please take a look at that. And again, if any of these spark particular interest for you, please reach out to your representative and senator and let them know of your support.
Okay, super. Appreciate that. Okay, let's shift again now. We'll bring on Michael Martin here to talk about a couple of our priority water bills that are coming up. And that, again, is, I'll just say, it's a good news piece for us. It's a priority bill set. And why don't you update folks, Michael?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Jim. So it's been, like Jim said, it's good news. And I'll also add that I'll take it a little bit in moderation. This is one step Getting a work session scheduled ahead of today's deadline is one step in a long process. And I just want to thank everybody who reached out on one of our top 9 priorities on water workforce operator and training, because I've heard from several members that they appreciated the outreach and the letters. And so what happened is it's scheduled for a work session. This is House Bill 3634. There has been some talk of reducing from 5.5 million to 3 million, but those budget discussions will kind of continue on through session. But bottom line, there's a lot of attention being paid to drinking water and wastewater operators, and I think folks understand the need, and it's very helpful also that this is a water caucus priority, and the co-chairs have been very helpful in pushing this bill as well. The second bill, House Bill 3700, this is a reciprocity bill. I think many of you know, on a biannual basis, OHA and DEQ put together a report on drinking water and wastewater certification, and really started this hearing on a simple request, and that is, we think we can do better when it comes to people who are applying to be drinking water, wastewater operators from out of state, and how their experience translates into Oregon. And so this bill is really meant to address that. And that bill has also been scheduled for a work session. So I just want to say, really, really, again, your advocacy matters. It's really appreciated. Again, I've had several members say that. And so both these bills are moving through the process, and I'm pretty sure we have the votes to get them out. So.
Okay, that's great news. Again, advocacy matters. We know that these bills are really important to you. And as Michael said, this is one step. It's a good step to take. Next thing is to get this thing pushed out of committee and get closer to the floor, and then make our way to the other chambers. So appreciate the work on this. Appreciate all the advocacy work as well. So I've got the next few pieces here for updates, essentially. And 2 of them are somewhat connected. So I'm going to start with Senate Bill 5550. This bill will be up on the Senate floor on Monday. So we're in a great place for that as well. This is essentially a budget rebalancing bill, but one component of it are some technical fixes for roughly 8 cities who received funding during the 24 session in Senate Bill 1537 and 4134. So cities of Manzanita, Springfield, Hood River, Gresham, Eugene, Madras, Lake Oswego, and the city of Portland via Prosper Portland had infrastructure funding that came in to basically help pay for that critical need for some housing development. We've been working with those cities as well as legislative staff to make sure that we get the technical fixes that are going to be helpful and allow these projects to proceed. So good news, it's moving. Should not be a problem with this bill moving forward at all, because it is a big piece of legislation that has a lot of elements in there for budget rebalancing. So it's going to need to go through. So that's in a great place. The reason it's connected to the next bill is as we look at infrastructure funding moving forward in the future, all of the advocacy work that we've been doing over the last several years is, I'll just say, to some extent culminated in having a programmatic funding level coming forward from the state that is significant. And our expectation is that we're going to see $100 million a biennium, and hopefully we'll get through this first biennium, and then we'll be able to springboard on that and continue to leverage $100 million each full legislative cycle. So this is House Bill 3031. This is an infrastructure funding for housing development bill, effectively. It sets up a framework on how the state's going to be approaching grant funding and a more programmatic structure for cities to be able to come forward with infrastructure funding related again to housing. So good news is they took a number of recommendations that we had fed into the process. And I want to thank all the cities around the table that were part of that conversation. But the good news is, again, like I said, They accepted a number of our recommendations. This is a far better bill than it started out with. And we're going to have some framework going forward on how grant funding is going to be prioritized. They're going to have a balancing effect that is kind of regional as well as small and large. And there'll be a scoring system that is put together on how they're going to be ranking this stuff. So there's going to be sort of administrative rulemaking that's going to be coming forward on this process. Business Oregon is going to be the lead program administrator on this. And these funds can go to development or improvement of transportation, water, wastewater, or stormwater infrastructure, including upgrades for system capacity. There's also site development work that's related to this could get paid for as well. So all good news on this bill moving forward. It's going to be moving through committee here, or actually it's going to be moving forward and stuff in and out of committee at this point in time. Another shift on policy for us, but and it's not a top priority, but it's been a priority for us in the past, and this is wildfire funding. And we've now got a couple of different pieces of legislation that are out there. One is House Bill 3940. I'll just say this has about 4 different types of funding options for coming up with the gap funding that Department of Forestry and State Fire Marshal's Office have identified. That's roughly $280 million a biennium that they have been short. And this includes anything from a 5-cent per bottle surcharge, so essentially bottle bill type of construction. It has a redirect on insurance retaliatory tax revenue. It has a 50% transfer of the rainy day fund for effectively a one-time funding component, as well as making changes to the forest products harvest tax of having a little bit more of a balance on that coming forward. There's also a lottery fund referral bill that's out there. This is a Senate Joint Resolution 11. This effectively, if the legislature pushes it through, would allow the voters in Oregon to get a percentage of lottery revenues to help pay for some of that wildfire gap funding. There's also a Senate bill out there, Senate Bill 1177. This is a redirect of the state kicker for funding. This is probably going to be a tough one to be able to move through the process, but it would effectively take the $1.8 billion in kicker that's in place right now, establish a permanent funding source from that, and it would essentially, I'll just say the way the math works on this is it would bring forward roughly $150 million a biennium to be able to help plug that hole. So we got a framework. It's out there at this point in time. There's multiple options that we're going to be working with, and again, we're going to be part of an overall coalition with counties and other interests around the table to try to find a funding package that we can actually push through the process. It's not going to be an easy one, that's for sure, but we've at least got some vehicles at this point in time to take a look at. The final piece on this I wanted to at least let people know about was wildfire map repeal. There's a bill out there right now. So those of you who may be familiar with the wildfire mapping process that's been going on for the last 4 years, Department of Forestry and Oregon State University have been working on a wildfire risk map. It has not been met with a whole lot of, I'll just say, love from different private landowners who don't want to see their lands show up in a risk map. At the same time, it's actually a pretty usable tool that's out there to help identify where wildfire risk is and where maybe to focus in investments in resilience as well as home hardening. However, from a political standpoint, this map is likely not going to be going forward. And part of what we're going to have to structure or have to consider going forward is to make sure that some of the home hardening standards that are in building code and the resilience or defensible space type of standards that are out there at least can be utilized by local governments as you go through your ordinance process. So that's really kind of the focus on the wildfire piece for me. I was going to mention one last thing, and this is the transportation package. So we've been spending the better part of since the session on really informational hearings. making sure that the Joint Committee on Transportation gets everything in front of them. A lot of this has been repetitive work that we have been doing because they too had a roadshow over the course of the summer. But we should find out here within the next week or so what that framework looks like. Once we have that framework and have a better sense on what the Joint Committee is going to be pushing forward in terms of revenue, in terms of different projects, we'll be pushing that information out to our membership and probably hitting the gas pedal on the rest of the session, because again, this is going to take a full-on effort here for the end of the session to be able to have a successful and a robust transportation package. So appreciate the indulgence, folks. We know there was a lot of volume and a lot of content today. But again, a lot of this is going to be reflected in our bulletin for follow-up.
All right, Jim, thank you. That concludes our presentation from our lobbying staff. I'm just scanning the chat to see if we've got any questions to catch up on. A reminder, as I mentioned earlier in the call, if you have a question, go right ahead and raise your hand, or if you want to just type it into the chat, we'll take questions in the order that we're seeing them there in the chat. Now is the time. Okay. No. Jim, it may be one of those rare weeks where we do not have a lengthy question and answer session.
We may have did our job, put people to sleep, or covered everything in its entirety. Oh,
Oh,
going to get away that easy.
Gold Hill.
Go ahead, Lily.
Go ahead, Lily.
I just figured I'd touch base. I know you said about the roadshow going around. It seemed like last time the roadshow went around, they limited it to 2 hours. And certain people were invited, so that took up a lot of the time. So for those of us, I'm not sure if it's better to go on the online one, or, I mean, 2.5 hour drive over to Klamath is the nearest one to us. But is there any sense on where anything is going with the funding ask? Because of your survey that we all did and the amount of money there, it resulted in almost every city asking for money. And of course, we're hearing that transportation is underwater $1 billion. So with the cost of everything being so high, the impact to our cities getting things done, just wondering if that's an area of advocacy you guys have been reaching into and seeing if there's any knowledge of where that's going.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think trying to identify funding from the general fund for any projects is going to be incredibly difficult. They do have a budget surplus right now of right around $600 million. It very well could grow by the time the next forecast comes in May, which is always the critical piece before they finish up the budgets. But as you know, as a former legislator, typically if you've got $500 million available in surplus revenue, you're going to probably have about $2 or $3 billion in requests. So it's pretty tough to try to balance on who's going to have success and not going to have success. We know there's an awful lot of folks in the line for additional funding, whether it's education, whether it's something related to transportation, wildfire. I mean, you name it. The best thing that I think I can offer at this point is, if you have the opportunity to get in front of this Ways and Means Committee and be able to make the case on the struggles that you face as a city, because we know that's significant. The survey work that we did here over the last year or so, a third of the cities are already in financial crisis. We know that before the end of this fiscal year, and you're starting your budgeting process here this spring, we know that third is going to grow to 2/3. And I think being able to articulate that kind of a message with Ways and Means may have some value for us as we're fighting for some of that state funding, but also probably more importantly, trying to fight for no more unfunded mandates. I mean, I think that's a continual problem. It's a driver for us and for cities out there trying to respond to new pieces of legislation that move through this body every single cycle, and typically don't come with new revenue. So I think those are pretty strong messages to be able to articulate in this. Jenna, did you want to offer anything else?
Yeah, I would say, Lily, they're probably going to keep it within their time limits and not go beyond that. So if the 2-hour drive is not worth it, they say they're going to prioritize virtual testimony when they do the Salem Roadshow. So if you get signed up on that early, you might have a better chance of getting heard for that one, and you won't have to drive 4 hours round trip. I think the other thing I would say is outside of just the Ways and Means process, I'm doing a lot of work with the House Revenue Committee and the chair of the House Revenue Committee to start looking at ways to get the state invested in property tax reform and trying to set up a property tax reform work group that would come back in 2027 with some suggestions and changes to how Measure 5 and 50 work, potentially a ballot measure. And so we're having more headway than we've had in a while, and people being more receptive to that. I think there's a lot going on, right? The bill for schools is really high, and that's what ties property taxes to the income tax. So we're working that way for more long-term, like revenue generation for cities. And I'm getting more and more hopeful the longer we go through session that there could be a real chance of something happening in this next interim and coming in 2027 where we might reimagine the property tax system. It will be a fight. It will be nothing will be said and done, but I think people are starting to see that we can't just keep chipping away at it and trying to make really small fixes. It's systemically broken.
If you need a volunteer, I'll volunteer to be on your work group on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jim, I'm seeing, and maybe this is you actually, Jenna, the question from Mayor Cross of Toledo related to the 50-30-20 funding ratio.
That would be me.
Oh, okay.
No, that's okay. So that's our core bread and butter on transportation revenue, and 50-30-20 is 50% to the state, 30% to the counties, and 20% for the cities for a proportional distribution. So question effectively is, how in danger is that? I think we need to keep our foot on the pedal on this one. I'm not willing to stop talking about the importance of that revenue share until a transportation package has been signed by the governor. I think there's still a little bit of rumblings out there. From time to time, you hear it from a committee member or two on joint committee that cities really don't need this funding. It's really more intended for the state. But we all know that the same folks who are driving vehicles on the highways and the interstate are the same folks who are driving their vehicles on your main street. And they're taxpayers, and that system, that transportation system, needs to be funded across the board, regardless of whose jurisdiction it is for the maintenance and operations. And with a $633 million annual operations and maintenance funding gap for cities alone, I think we can make our case for continuing to be part of that distribution formula and how critical that is for long-term investments. So bottom line, keep your foot on the pedal.
All right, Jim, thank you. Not seeing other questions or hands raised. Before we wrap up, a couple of questions for you, Jim. With the deadline period for which bills will go forward and which will not happening right now, do you have any sense of how many of those 3,400 will actually continue on, or is that just impossible to? Okay.
That's almost next to impossible at this point. Next week, I hope to have a halfway decent number. I'll probably do a little bit of math and see what percentage drops off. But honestly, even if it drops to 1,500 as an example,
right,
that's still a hell of a lot of bills that we have to deal with for the next deadline that'll be coming up later in April and stuff for second chamber deadline. So
got it. Okay, not seeing any further questions. We're going to wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for showing up today and participating. Couple of quick reminders. We do this every Friday at noon. So please make sure you mark your calendars to be back with us next Friday. Couple of other things. If your city is planning to submit a city award, we're giving those away at we're presenting those at the spring conference this year. Please see our website for the criteria. The deadline is fast approaching. Speaking of that spring conference, we are getting closer to a sellout. So if anyone from your city is planning to attend, I would encourage you to register today. Thanks again for joining our webinar. Hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll see you out here or back here on Zoom next Friday at noon. Thanks, everyone.